Hello health champions! Today we're going to talk about the healthiest citrus fruits, what to look for and what to avoid. Plus we will debunk a few myths about citrus fruits, and if you watch all the way through you will actually understand why they are ranked the way they are. All the different types of citrus that we have today actually originate from just 4 types of fruit. One is called pomelo fruit. Second is citron, 3 is mandarin, and 4 is something called papeda citrus. The pomelo is the ancestor of grapefruit. It's very large and it has a very thick skin. Other than that, it's quite similar to the grapefruit today. The citron is the ancestor of lemon and it looks like a very large, bumpy lemon. Mandarin is a small, sweet orange. The papeda citrus comes in all kinds of different sizes, anywhere from 2 centimeters, which is like that big, to about 10, which is about that big. And it is rarely eaten by itself because it's described as dry, bitter, and unpalatable. Sometimes they use the skin for different essential oils. It has very aromatic, but nobody basically eats that. And today we have hundreds of different citrus fruits, but I'm going to focus on the most common ones that are all derived from these 4 ancestors. So today we have lemons, and there's dozens and dozens of types of lemons. There's dozens of types of lime. And from the mandarin, we have derived all those small, sweet, candy-like fruits like tangerines, clementines, satsumas, and so forth. Then we have the orange, and that includes the blood orange, the Seville orange, the Jaffa, the Caracara, and so forth. And the grapefruit is the pink and the red and the white and so forth. And the pomelo is very similar to the grapefruit, but like we said, it's bigger. Another one is kumquat, which is pretty common in Asia. And it's a little different than most other citrus, because it's very small and it's high in fiber because you actually eat the skin. And furthermore, most of the sweetness is in the skin and the inside is kind of tart. So it's like opposite of a lot of other fruits. When we look at the benefits, we need to stay clear of the tendency to sensationalize trivial amounts of benefit. So when they say that something is rich in protein, then that's not really true. Most citrus is less than 1 gram. The ones we're going to talk about is 0.7 to 1. And the only exception is the kumquat, because there you also eat the skin, which has a little bit more. So for 100 grams of edible fruit, which is like the edible portion of a medium orange or medium to large orange, then we're getting less than 1 gram for the most part. We often hear that citrus fruit is very rich in potassium and magnesium, but for a typical serving of about 100 grams, you're going to get 0 to 5% of these minerals. So we want to think of fruit as a treat, especially if we're trying to lose weight or reverse insulin resistance, which most people have some issue with. Then we don't want to think of these foods as a way to get more nutrients and then start eating more. It should be more of a treat or an occasional thing. Citrus fruit, however, is pretty rich in vitamin C. It's about the only nutrient that there's a substantial amount of, where we can get most of our recommended intake from a moderate serving. And the other thing it's rich in, of course, is sugar. We're going to get anywhere from 1.7 all the way up to 11 grams of sugar in 100 grams of edible fruit. And what about all the other nutrients? Well, most citrus fruit has a little bit of a lot of different nutrients. So it's a good food source. Everything adds up. But there's not enough difference that we want to point to one over another and change the ranking based on that. But I want to straighten out a few more things. We often hear that fruit is very rich in fiber. And that's not really true unless you also eat the skin. And with citrus, the kumquat is the only one where we usually eat the skin, and therefore, instead of maybe 1 or 2% fiber, it has 6% fiber. But what about pomelo? Someone claimed that a single serving of pomelo has 6 grams of fiber per serving. What they fail to mention that's a pomelo the size of a cantaloupe, and you probably need 4 people to eat that one serving. So that's for 600 or 700 grams of edible fruit, which is way more than you want to eat in one sitting. Other things that are claimed to be beneficial are antioxidants. And yes, fruit has antioxidants, but that's not for your benefit. The fruit has them built in to protect the fruit from the environment, from the oxygen, from prematurely oxidizing. That's how fruit stays fresh while it's still on the tree. In the human body, we do have some need for antioxidants, and the ones in the orange aren't going to hurt us, but we have our own system primarily based on glutathione, which we manufacture. Another claimed benefit was that citrus fruit is cholesterol-free and it's low in fat and low in sodium. And this is so ridiculous to claim that something is good because it doesn't have something, especially when the items they're talking about are myths. So cholesterol is not something you want to try to avoid. You want to try to avoid inflammation. And I've done some videos on that you can understand that further. But high cholesterol or ingesting cholesterol is not a problem. And just because something is low in fat or sodium doesn't make it a health food. Fat is extremely healthy if it's healthy fat. And sodium is something that the body can't manufacture. We need to ingest it in fairly large amounts every day, and the excess we can get rid of. So all of those are myths. And very often people claim that this fruit or that fruit is great because it has medicinal properties. It will cure cancer or be antifungal and so forth. And while they may contain some of these compounds, we don't really want to focus on that part because most of that is in the skin, in the essential oils. And most of the time that they do those studies, they extract the oils and they apply it to a culture of some pathogen that's at a much, much higher concentration than we could ever get from the fruit. So again, those things are there. They're not going to hurt us, but they're not going to provide any benefit that you'll probably notice. And then let's talk about the sugar in fruit, because so many people say that the fruit in sugar doesn't matter. And there's so much misinformation about the types and the amounts. So lemon is one of the best ones. It has 2.5 grams of total sugar per 100 grams of edible fruit, which is probably a little more than you'll eat in a typical day. And then we have lime, which has even less, 1.7 grams per 100. On the other extreme is mandarin, which has 11 grams. And that's mandarin, clementine, tangerine, and so forth. And the regular orange is pretty close at about 9.5. The kumquat at 9.5 is the same as the orange, whereas the grapefruit and the pomelo is a little bit less. And I couldn't find any reliable, consistent information on the pomelo, so I just put it at the same as the grapefruit because they're very, very similar, but we don't know exactly where that one is. So let's understand what these numbers are. So sugar, the most common form of sugar that we talk about is when we have table sugar called sucrose. So it's a 6-carbon ring called glucose together with a 5-carbon ring called fructose. And when we link those together, that is table sugar, white sugar. And this also happens to be in fruit. Then if we break this little bond here and we have these floating around by themselves, then they go from being a disaccharide to a monosaccharide. And this single 6-carbon ring is the glucose that is the backbone of all of metabolism. The blood sugar that we have is glucose. Every cell in the body can use this glucose. But the other ring there with 5 carbons is called fructose. And that is something that only the liver can break down. So if we have a lot of fructose, that tends to overload the liver and lead to fatty liver. So if you eat a little fruit once in a while and you're healthy, you're not going to get a fatty liver. But if you already have a fatty liver, then you want to really watch that fructose because it will prevent you from recovering. So when we eat a fruit, we need to understand that they all have sucrose, glucose, and fructose. They all occur in this form in the fruit. And if we eat the sucrose, it'll take a few minutes for an enzyme to break that down once it gets into the small intestine. But fruit is digested very quickly, so this is going to happen relatively soon. And then that sucrose breaks down into glucose and fructose. So if we have 1-1-1 or 2-1-1, it doesn't really matter because once it breaks down, all we have left is glucose and fructose. And the ratios are going to vary just a tiny little bit, but overall we're looking at 50-50, regardless of which fruit we eat. Some of them are going to be 55-45 or even 60-40, but pretty much we're getting a 50-50 ratio combination of glucose and fructose no matter which citrus fruit we eat. And yes, it's still sugar, and yes, it still matters. And the next thing to understand is the total carbs, the net carbs, and the fiber. So if we have the total carbs being this much, then that encompasses both the edible, the sugar, and the fiber. So this portion here would be net carbs, and this portion here would be the fiber. So when you calculate what really matters, it's really the net carbs, because the fiber you're not going to absorb. It's not going to affect your glucose. You're not going to metabolize that and turn it into energy. And when we eat a carbohydrate, whether it's a fruit or a grain or a potato, then these net carbs in turn are going to be made up of sugar and starch. And starch is when we have a bunch of these glucose molecules lined up together. So if we have one and then we link it to another and another and another, and then these can go branching off and we can have hundreds and thousands, that's called starch. But it's still made up entirely of glucose. All of starch is still glucose, so it breaks down and becomes blood sugar. And in fruit, most of the time, almost all of the net carbs are sugar. And in citrus fruit, there is no starch at all. There is zero starch. So we would think that all of the sugar is going to be net carbs. But here's where it gets a little bit confusing. And honestly, I couldn't find an answer to this. So if you know, then please help me out here. But when we look at the net carbs, we'll see that for lemon and lime, there is a huge difference between the sugar and the net carbs. So logically, based on what we know and what I could find, because I couldn't find any explanation, then the difference between the sugar and the net carbs should be starch. But again, I don't know what that is. However, for the rest of the fruits, for mandarin and orange and kumquat, the difference is almost zero. So this is what we would expect for fruits, that all the net carbs are sugar. But then again, for the grapefruit and the pomelo, there is a little bit of difference. So there's some unaccounted net carbs. And it could be that they contain something called oligosaccharides, which is when you link up not 2, but maybe 5 or 7 or 8 of these saccharides, of these glucose or fructose molecules. And then it wouldn't be technically a sugar, or it wouldn't be a starch. But again, I could not find any information. So if you know, let me know. And if you've read about grapefruit, you might have come across something called furanocoumarins. But it's not just grapefruit. It's also pomelos, tandulos, bitter orange, and Seville oranges that contain this compound. And why does that matter? Because they tell you if you are on a statin medication, then you should not eat these fruits because it can interfere with the breakdown of these statin medication, with the body's metabolism of these statin drugs. And therefore, if you're on a statin and you eat citrus, you could increase your risk of side effects. So therefore, should you stop the citrus or should you stop the statin? Well, I'm not your medical doctor officially, so I can't tell you what to do on that. You need to have that discussion with the doctor who prescribed it. However, I do believe that the vast majority of statin medication is prescribed for the wrong reasons. So I want to explain a little bit about how this works. Your body manufactures the vast majority of cholesterol in your body. So if you start with a certain compound, and we don't name these because it just gets complicated, then body goes through a series of steps and eventually it produces something that is going to be the precursor for CoQ10 and for cholesterol. And this CoQ10 is necessary for your body to turn food into energy. So as much as 95% of all the energy that you make with the oxygen, you oxidize food, is the result of CoQ10 being present. And therefore, you make most of your energy through this pathway. And this is the energy that's the most important for the organs who use the most energy. So we're talking about your heart, we're talking about your brain and your muscles and your liver. These are very highly metabolically active organs. So this energy is absolutely necessary for them to do their work. And if you don't have enough CoQ10, then these are the first organs to suffer. And if you take a statin medication, then its job is to go in and block, to reduce or shut down this part of the process. And if it shuts down the first part of the process, then obviously it's going to reduce all the steps down line from that. So it will reduce your cholesterol, which is the purpose of the statin drug, and it will absolutely do that. It will absolutely work, but it will do it at the cost of also reducing CoQ10 and also reducing the energy. So now there'll be a little bit less or a lot less of energy for your heart, brain, muscle, and liver. And that's where most of the side effects from statin drugs occur. That's why you have side effects primarily related to these organs. But the problem goes even further because this statin medication is a foreign molecule in the body. Your body looks for things that it can use that contribute to the function of the body, like building blocks and fuel and catalysts like vitamins and minerals. But this molecule that the statin medication is made up of will never become a building block or fuel, and it's not a catalyst for something your body needs to do. So it's foreign, and your body has to break it down, and it needs enzymes in the liver to do that. So this statin is going via an enzyme, and it's a little bit different for different statin medications. So this problem doesn't affect all of them, but it affects the major ones. And if we have these enzymes, then the liver can convert this foreign molecule to something that is harmless. We can neutralize it, and then we can flush it out. That's how most of the detox and the biotransformation happens in the liver. Now, where does it become a problem with citrus? It is if we eat these citrus fruits that contain this furanocoumarin, then they will block the activity of this enzyme. And now we can't break down this statin drug. And now, not only are we reducing the energy supply to the liver, but now this statin medication, this foreign molecule, builds up and starts to further damage the liver. So now we have two different sources and mechanisms of liver damage. So again, I can't tell you whether you want to stop the citrus or the statin, but you want to be aware of how this works, and you want to start understanding enough about cholesterol so that you can have an intelligent discussion with your medical doctor to see if a statin is appropriate, because in my opinion, most of the time it's not. And we also need to talk about juice, because more than 80% of oranges are turned into juice. So when we're talking about lemon and lime, then those are totally fine to juice because you're not going to drink it by the glass. You'll use a teaspoon here and there for cooking and flavoring, which is awesome. I use it for just about everything. But when it comes to orange, then understand that one orange has about 7 grams of sugar. And usually people say that the biggest difference between the juice and the fruit is the fiber, but it's not really that. It's how much you consume. So if you eat an orange, you're probably just going to eat an orange and be done, and you get 7 grams of sugar. However, if you have 1 cup of orange juice, like 1 regular glass of orange juice, that's about the equivalent of 3 oranges. And you wouldn't typically sit down and eat 3 oranges back to back, but you have no problem drinking a glass or even 2 of orange juice, which then gives you 21 grams of sugar. So it's deceptive how much you consume, and that is the biggest problem. But I also might add that in terms of freshness and nutrition, the fruit is far superior because the orange juice has been processed. It has been oftentimes concentrated and then diluted. And all of the time, if it's sold in stores in any scale, it's going to be pasteurized. So it's going to be totally changed. If you ever have the juice, then I recommend that you squeeze it yourself. And over the years, in the last 15 years or so, orange juice sales have actually dropped. They're down by something like 40%. However, with the COVID epidemic, when that just took off and was announced and made public and people were aware of it, in March of 2020, sales of orange juice went up by 70%. And that was temporary, but what it tells us is people still believe that orange juice is the way to get vitamin C. So they went out and went crazy and stocked up on orange juice. But all you're really getting, yes, you're getting a little bit of vitamin C, and yes, it is beneficial for your health and your immune system. But what you're getting most of all is just a bunch of sugar that's going to more than offset any benefit of the vitamin C. The pomelo is the highest in vitamin C at 61 milligrams per 100 grams of edible fruit, followed by the lemon and the orange at 53. Kumquat has 44, grapefruit has 31, lime has 29, and mandarin has 27. So like we've talked about, citrus fruit has all of these different compounds in it. But I'm going to focus on the 2 that I think matters, that are worth ranking on, that has any significant amount. And we want to keep the sugar low, and we want to keep the vitamin C high. So we're going to rank these from S for superior, and then we're going to give them a grade of A, B, C, and then we'll let you know if there was anything that failed. And I want to start in the C category. That is like a pass, but not really great, and that would be the mandarin, which was the highest in sugar, but it doesn't have a whole lot of vitamin C. In the B category, which is a little better, we have the kumquat and the orange. And they're about the same amount of sugar, but the orange has a little bit more vitamin C, not a huge difference. In the A category, we have the grapefruit and the pomelo. And again, I couldn't find any reliable data on the sugar for the pomelo, but because they're very similar, I'm going to assume it's the same. And the pomelo has a good bit more of the vitamin C. And in the superior category, I'm going to put lime and lemon because they are so much lower in sugar and they still have a very good amount of vitamin C. So if you're watching this and you're trying to lose weight or reduce insulin resistance and you're trying to be in ketosis or do a low carb diet, then I would suggest that you only entertain the fruits in the superior category. That maybe you go into the A or B once in a while, but that would be a rare exception. And now you're wondering, why is the F category blank? Well, originally I wasn't going to put anything there because none of the fruits, nothing that nature makes is really quite that bad. But then I realized we also talked about orange juice. So the fail category is orange juice because it has so much sugar that even though you are getting a good amount of vitamin C through that, there is no amount of vitamin C that can make up for how much sugar is in orange juice. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to love that one. And if you truly want to master health by understanding how the body really works, make sure you subscribe, hit that bell, and turn on all the notifications so you never miss a life-saving video.